Why do you think religious identity feels more like a cage than freedom for most people? At least for me.
That's a great question. I think there's multiple factors there. I'll just share two that come to me right off the bat. And the first one is that because there are a lot of very strong belief systems that accompany religious, sects or religious beliefs. And those belief systems tend to be limiting on our true nature. They're not actually aligned with who we really are, and they're very strong. And because there's a group of people that are believing it, and that group could be very large and it could go back thousands of years, then there's a lot of baggage around that belief, a lot of baggage around the thoughts themselves.
I'm Melissa Monti, and you're listening to Mind Love.
So that's one reason why I think that it could be very kind of limiting in that way. Another reason is that our identity, so like I say, I am a Jew, or I am a Christian, or even like other stuff too. It could be like, I am a man. If I'm too attached to my I am statement of whatever I'm saying, that falls into the realm of the Ahrimanic impulse. And the Ahrimanic impulse is something that Rudolf Steiner elaborates on. Ahriman would like to restrict us to identifying with our religious identities so that there's a sense of separation, because that which unites people will dissipate Ahriman's impulse. Basically, Ahriman would like to keep us stuck to the world's plane of material existence and not evolve into our much more spiritual, much more balanced selves. So I think that's why it feels like so cagey to have strong religious identities. Although it doesn't feel cagey for some people. For some people, it's so integrally their identity that's who they think they are. So it's not a cage for them. But should they, like yourself and myself, be evolving towards a sense of freedom, a sense of true expression of the divine in each individual self, then that would feel a little cagey, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation because we've talked a lot about religious deconstruction here. We go very esoteric as well. But I think so many of the people that are deconstructing or even just trying to figure out where they fit. I know since 2020, I know a lot of people who kind of went Christian and then like, wait, this doesn't feel right, or went converted to Judaism. And I have a lot of questions still. I have a lot of answers, I feel like, that feel right to me. But when I am really looking at the history of the religion, the part that I feel like I have the least amount of information on is the role of the Jewish people. And what really intrigued me about this interview topic was how you say that the Jewish people were chosen to build the vessel for God to incarnate into humanity. So I have questions about that. But then they refused to let the vessel break open when Christ came. That's a lot of information. And so before we get into kind of unwinding all of that, how did you go from Orthodox Jew to teaching that your entire tradition was maybe supposed to end 2,000 years ago?
Or take on a new direction. Perhaps the very fulfillment of the purpose in providing that vessel so that the Christ could incarnate was fulfilled 2,000 years ago with the incarnation of Christ in Jesus of Nazareth. So how did I go from Orthodox Jew? Well, okay, I was raised in an Orthodox family, but I myself always felt inclined towards I felt I identified with being Jewish, but I also was open to other traditions, to learning. Although I did maintain a pretty small pool, largely Jewish, largely Kabbalistic. I was always interested in the esoteric path of Judaism. But then I got very sick, and I think that broke down my ego, my identity, my ability to be strongly identified with my beliefs, my ability to have confidence in what I knew was true, because I thought what I knew was true. Like that was then. And And then when I got very sick, I think that broke me down enough to be open enough to learn some things that just blasted open my horizons. And that really started with the teachings through Kriya Yoga, like the yogic spiritual traditions, and the actual applications of like pranayama and meditation and stuff like that. So that really started the ball into expanding my horizon, into understanding something that I never got from the Jewish path. I think if you were to look really hard, you might find it, but it's really not forthcoming. It's not the first thing that you encounter, or even the millionth thing that you encounter when you're studying and following the Jewish path. And that's the understanding that who I am, my fundamental nature, is not this egoic being that I'm inhabiting. Like there is this, I'm not saying this is not real, not, it exists, but it's not who I am. So my body, my emotional body, even my mental body, my mind is not my I am. I never got that from Judaism, and it made the whole world of difference. I could even, I mean, everything became much more alive and much more accessible to me. My spiritual growth had stalled, and it was waiting for that upgrade because it's really the fundamental piece that I was missing. So that's how I kind of went from the orthodoxy to Orthodox Judaism to the universal truth, which runs through all, I want to say, all religions that or spiritual paths or cosmologies that accept that reality. I am that I am is not only a statement for God, and we are separate from God, but it is a statement for every human being to say now, especially after the incarnation of Christ made that available, that I am is available for us. Because when I say us, I mean us human beings, even though we're not just human, right? So yeah. Did I answer that? I feel like I said a lot, but I'm not sure if I fully answered your question there.
Yeah, you did. And I believe that I am statement that's actually been passed through many different wisdom traditions. And so it's always been interesting to me how that is the linchpin for most Christians of Jesus claiming that he is God, when I believe he was handing us that, like, it's like a reclamation. Speaking that is claiming, reminding yourself of the God within you. I am trained in transcendental meditation, but I sometimes switch up my mantra. I
Me
don't know
too.
if that makes me a bad TM student, but when I'm
Bad,
not
bad,
using my
bad.
TM mantra, I'll use Ire Asha Ire, because that was the original, what was told to me. I don't know Aramaic. I'm not going to pretend to. I know a
That's
few key
Hebrew.
phrases, and that's our Hebrew. Yes. And
That's
so I'm
Hebrew.
like, you
That's
know what?
Hebrew.
Might as well. It can't do anything negative, I suppose.
That's what the burning bush said to Moses. When Moses asked the burning bush, because he had the presence of the divine, that was the presence of Yahweh, who was incarnated into the physical state of reality so that he could communicate at that level. Moses said, "Who will I tell the people what your name is?" And the bush says, "Eya Asher Eya." And so that means I shall be as I shall be, or I am that I am, right? That's really the statement of I am that I am. It's a beautiful name.
Yeah. And one thing that we agree on, and I think a lot of people are coming to this understanding now, whether it's A Course in Miracles, whether you're going the New Age route, whatever it is, you go deep and you realize at some point there was a separation from God. That is what the creation story really is. I personally believe that even the Bible we were handed, that's given to us as this literal history, has a lot more myth and symbolism than most people who follow it would like to see. But one thing that you say in your video series is how the separation from God wasn't a mistake. And this, I think, is something that even those who understand, creation was separation from God, they disagree on this. it's like the biggest mistake we ever made, or the
Or
way
meant
that
to
God is
be.
experiencing itself. And you say that it was necessary for consciousness to evolve. And so if the separation isn't the fall, what is?
Well, the separation is the fall. However, that was intended in my awareness and within this cosmology, which is backed by, so I do, as you know, in the video series, I use two sources of quotations, which one is Rudolf Steiner, the other is The Only Planet of Choice. So, but basically the philosophical point here is that being all that is, God is all that is. There was nothing else aside from that. So the oneness, it knew itself intellectually, but it could not have experience of what that the glory and the grandeur was. It didn't feel, it didn't experience. It just was. If you're all and there's nothing else, there's no way to compare. There's no mirror. So separation was intended, but there is of course a risk in separation, because to create a separation is to create a world of illusion, because separation doesn't truly exist. There's no such thing as separation, but we can create a veil around around ideas that creates an illusion of separation. And within that illusion of separation starts the first, let's call it, for lack of a better word, sin, in regards to missing the mark of true nature. Because sin from the Hebrew means to miss the mark. Like an archer would miss the mark. That's a sin. So we we believe we're separate, and from that belief comes all the other horrors and atrocities that humans have done and can do to each other, can do to themselves. All the illness, all the things that emanate from that are very real points of suffering that come from this separation. So that's like the hard, the harshness of the separation. But the separation itself allows for us, created in the image and likeness of God, children of God, to know ourselves as individual beings, so that we can have this paradox of the marriage of I am someone, like I am Moshe, I'm this guy, but then to have that ability to give up the individualness, which is an illusion. Then there is this return to the state of oneness within all the individuals that creates an ocean of effect on the whole of creation, such that with each person that returns is this like the celebration, the celebratory release of individuality for the purpose of God knowing him herself through us, having the experience of the divine. But we had to have separation to have that magical, mystical return. Otherwise, we're back in the beginning, which is the problem of God is all there is and there's nothing else. And there's a kind of a problem with that, which some cosmologies, like Conversations with God. I don't know if you ever read that one,
Yeah,
but
it's a great read.
yeah, it's a great read. The book one was really, I really like how it dealt with this. Basically, that if there was, that's where some of the quotes come in, and The Only Planet of Choice says that if you couldn't challenge your own mind, would you become bored? So if you were playing a game of soccer or a game of chess, and you are the one controlling both sides, every player, because there's oneness, is there a sense of boredom? Not a human boredom, but a lack of the experience of the joy of what it's like to play, to have a challenge. There would have been no challenge without the separation. So yes, separation is sanctioned. From the separation, we can get into a lot of trouble, and we have. In The Only Planet of Choice, the Council of Nine do mention we would have been foolish not to think that the opposition wouldn't cause problems on Earth. And just to make a note about the opposition, it is akin and synonymous with evil. And evil is that which enables us to experience separation. So there's a purpose in the creation of evil, in the role of evil, but we're not to embrace it as if it is part of God's full nature, even though it exists to challenge us, it exists to give us this ability to have separation. The devil is sometimes called the Lord of Illusion, right? Have you heard that statement
I
about the
have.
devil?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
yeah.
have differing beliefs about the devil than most people. Continue. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, well, in this sense, the devil provides the material of mind, the thought forms and the false beliefs that people can believe themselves. It's always voluntary, but he has influence to try to get people to believe what is not real, what is in the realm of illusion, because that's what the devil rules. And the devil is synonymous. There's different aspects of the devil. It's part of this whole creation. When I mentioned Ahriman, the Ahrimanic force is a form of the devil. So it's part of the challenge. So with the Jewish people, providing the vessel for individuality, like that was a sanctioned purpose. They were meant to carve out this strong identity, like I am an individual self. The earlier peoples lived in a dreamlike state where they weren't as incarnate. They weren't fully grounded in the physical individual reality. So the Jewish people had this role to carve out that individuality so that God's nature could incarnate in the flesh. And there was a marriage, an alchemical union of spirit and physicality. At that moment, the whole people and all people were meant to evolve into, to flourish into what the Christ offered in incarnating into the flesh, which was basically all of us to evolve into or to embody our God nature in the flesh, so that each of us is experiencing an individuality that is infused with the non-individual nature of the oneness of Creator. But that's where we got into some problems, because that didn't happen fully yet as a people and for planet Earth, as we can see is obvious, right?
Well, let's dig into that just for a second, because it makes me wonder, and I love the way you kind of broke that down in your video series about how there was a progression from this group soul consciousness where people experienced God through dreamlike visions and yeah, probably a little bit more to that oneness than we experience now. Now it's hard to find God in the average person.
Yeah, yeah.
You really gotta commit. But wouldn't, if one group of people is literally selected for almost a brain mutation, it sounds like this brain upgrade of the suffering to create the individuation, but doesn't that create hierarchy? Like some humans are more evolved than others?
No, I wouldn't say it's a form of evolution. It is a form of choosing of service. And I don't consider that as being like an elitist thing. For example, because of the nature of the way the intellect was evolved in Abraham. Abraham was, let's say, the first of his kind, where his mind was geared to experience like a strong form of intellect, so that he could understand and he could really individuate, because the intellect also helps the individuation of the person through identity. But part of that is actually problematic. See, when we discuss this, there's a paradox that unfolds, just because we know, right? Like people like ourselves, we're waking up to who we are. We know who we are. We know what the nature of creation is like. So we could recognize the problems with that form. But at the time, Abraham was 5,000 years ago, and it took 42 generations, or basically 3,000 years, to prepare the vessel from this time of Abraham to the time of Christ, because there are other beings that walked on earth that were wanting and calling the Son being the Christ to embody that. But they weren't ready. Their vessels didn't have the strength to be able to hold that vibrational frequency. Wasn't strong enough. So they could experience it, but not the full hurrah that the purpose of creation all coalesced around this event at the mystery of Golgotha with the incarnation of Christ and Jesus of Nazareth. So it did take the strength of the people, and that's not an elitist thing. Part of the strength came from, for example, 400 years of slavery. Well, there's a little debate on how long it was, but there were hundreds of years of slavery, and the grit and the strength that has to go into that, surviving that sort of thing, prepared the vessel as well. But the preparatory incarnating of individuality and consciousness was fulfilled with Jesus. So we didn't have to do that anymore. And the Christ renders all people equal. There's no elitism after that point. This is just all preparation, right? So like if we have in humanity, we have humanity is like a human body, right? There's different parts of the body. So each part has a different role. Like the heart is very important. Is it better than the hand? Can we say it's better than the hand? I don't think so. But some roles were important. Some roles, but the Christ, because of the nature of the Christ, which is God, which is oneness, which is unity consciousness, it renders all those things fulfilled. It renders the individual expression fulfilled. It renders definitely any elitist identity of superiority. That is definitely a problem that is not divinely sanctioned. So I wouldn't support any idea of superiority there. But some unique expressions of, there was a strength in that character that could enable the incarnation of the godly nature. Yes, I think that is true. And I don't think that diminishes anybody. I don't think that takes away from any people. Do you? Do you think that diminishes?
No. No, I don't. I love to play the role on the show of asking what I think people might ask. But for me,
Great.
I even feel that now I wouldn't choose the word chosen, but I would say that certain people are called. I can see a very clear split between those that are really trying to understand, that are really trying to evolve, that are really trying to raise the vibration of the planet, and those that are just getting by with their 9 to 5 and coming home and watching the Kardashians. And there's nothing wrong with that. I watch Love is Blind. I'm going to admit it, but like, it's not about what you watch, but it's like, what do you believe the purpose of this lifetime is for? Again, doesn't mean you don't get any breaks. You don't get to shut off sometimes, but in my own family, I'm the only one. And so I wouldn't call that chosen, but why am I so called? Why can I not even shut off my curiosity if I wanted to? Because I have gone through phases of being like, God, I think ignorance probably would be bliss. I don't want to know all the things that I know because I feel isolated often with the information that I have.
Well, it's a lonely path. It's a solo path as well. And I mean, you could have community that's supportive, and that's lovely. I think that's beautiful. But the path to the divineness, to the Christ in the individual self is a solo path. So there is some hardships to being, because I mean, I feel comfortable saying, well, then you are chosen. Like you're chosen to embody the divine. That doesn't make you better than. That means that you're choosing. I heard this expression, I choose to be chosen. And in a way, you've chosen to be chosen. However we want to define that. Even today, to embody the Christ takes enormous strength of will, of discipline, of character, and of intention. It doesn't come easy. Once in a while, a person just sort of like is ready and the cap is ready to come off and there they are. But for most of us, it's a hard continual dedication. You're facing challenges all the time, temptations, because this world is filled with the temptations of the Kardashian show. If you sit down and you throw up your feet to watch the Kardashians, you enjoy it just as a means of relaxing. There's nothing wrong with that, like you said. But if all you're doing is feeding your intellect and your consciousness with that kind of material, that's a problem. So the world is filled with temptation. The world is designed, the modern world is designed because of the Ahrimanic impulse to
Mm.
keep a person from evolving into the spiritual balance of their nature. So it tries to keep, like medicine is very Ahrimanic. It's like we're material beings, drugs, and the way to heal somebody is to like take away the symptoms at the physical level. It's absurd. It's very shallow medicine. It's very Ahrimanic. Our educational system, identity politics. This is all like very Ahrimanic stuff. So the world is difficult and there's a lot of challenges, and a person has to be willing to put their whole heart, their whole soul, and all of their power and all their faculties into this path if they want to make it. And the whole make it thing, I just want to say, this is what is so ironic about all of this. There's nothing to be made. Like, we're already there. Our true nature is the foundation of our being is that I am. So it's just a matter of pulling away the webbing of falsehood, of false beliefs, shedding, letting go, instead of moving into something that, I got to go over there to meet God. What I'm talking about. It's just a recognition, recognizing that we are already that.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, I did a plant medicine retreat for my 40th birthday this year, and it was life changing. But one of the pieces that stands out the most was I was having this experience, and I remember asking within it, am I being initiated or am I the one doing the initiation? And my experience, it's almost hard to bring into words, but so much of it was about claiming the role of teacher. Like, I've been a student, I will always be a student, but also realizing that I have things to share. And in that mind state, or I should say energy state, the answer to that question, who's doing the initiating, it was all the same. Because if we are all one, then of course I am initiating myself and I'm being initiated because it's all one. And that reminds me of what you just said about you choose to be chosen. If you remember that you have the role to choose, then you can choose you. And so you're both. You're the experiencer and the one creating the experience. And that's really what God choosing to experience itself is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. And because this is available to all people. So the Christ is not a Christian thing, actually. Even though the Christians have helped, that's been their role to hold this idea, principle around Christ. Like, the Christ lives in different forms, defined differently, but it's all the same thing. Like, for example, the Tao in the Taoist tradition is the same as the Christ. It's not a Christian thing. It's not Judeo-Christian. It's universal. It's a universal truth. It's the fulfillment of the purpose of while we went through all this trouble. God is good. God doesn't want us to suffer per se. God doesn't, thrive on our suffering. Our suffering is as a result of us believing things that are not true. That's what causes suffering. So the universe beckons us to embrace the Christ. But there's this real challenge going on that the Ahrimanic force and the so-called devil is there still as a player in this whole game of life. That's one of the principles of Kabbalah, that life is a game. It's this very game to return. So those things are there still they're playing their role very seriously. They take it very seriously. And the game is pretty serious. But the purpose is to return to the true self, to the Christ, so that all of creation witnesses what God is in the individual self, releasing it to that point of unification. And that is like, the way I picture it is like the grandest celebration, which exceeds the celebration of, in like the Return of the Jedi, when when the Emperor is destroyed. When we return, when humanity wakes up and remembers and returns, the whole universe is going to be lifted. The whole purpose of creation is lifted into this higher realm that I don't think any of us can even fathom the miraculous nature of that. That's how I see it happening. And it's inevitable. This has to happen. Whether it's like tomorrow in the blink of an eye, or it's in 10 years, I'm not going to predict because I have no idea. But I can predict that it's going to happen. It has to, because the nature of the truth is eternal. God's nature is eternal. And the nature of the fallen energies and falsehood is not eternal. So what is not eternal cannot last forever. So this has to happen at some point. I just hope that we can save lives before it happens, before like calamity strikes, and we can fulfill it sooner than later, because it's been a couple of thousand years where.
Yeah. Well, it's like, what have we done since then? We learned how to make ketchup green, and like now AI. But I don't think this was the path. So that was what was supposed to happen when Christ incarnated. The message was, you're ready. The training wheels come off. And then that was supposed to be the shift when humanity shifted from external law to internal divinity. So it's not about Jews accepting Jesus as Messiah or going to the Christianity route, because Christianity also became external law for most people. Why do you think that shift didn't happen the way that it was intended? And if it didn't, then I could almost hear the argument that, did God make a mistake?
Yes, right. It's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that. Thank you so much. What a beautiful question. So important. So basically, if the Jewish people had embraced Christ as a people and grew into that, I don't know if it would have all happened immediately, but it would have been a growth process of entering into that space. Then the earth would be fully released into the oneness that's the purpose of creation. Glory, glory, hallelujah. But the forces, the Aramonic forces, and the forces that oppose the God's nature, specifically targeted Jewish people so that wouldn't happen. And they targeted them through their wounded nature, because there's like a history of oppression, Jews encountering a lot of enmity and like competition and jealousy. And I'm not saying that the Jews are perfect in all of that, but there was a lot of history of like the world is against us, which created a strong belief system amongst Jewish people that you will hear today. The world is against us. Like what happened in Australia, the killing on the beach. That just, whenever things like this happen, it always like kind of doubles down this belief that the world is against us. The unity of all peoples is intimately connected to the Christ. So if the belief of the Jewish people is the world is against us, then they oppose, they stand in individuality as a people and prevent in themselves that unity from happening with the people. And one thing that I understand, which I do believe is true, that the Jewish people represent a microcosm of all the nations on earth. So what occurs amongst the Jewish people is then radiated out in collective consciousness for humanity. So as the Jewish people hold this very strong belief that the world is against us, it also ripples out, and other people have like, well, we are the best, or the world is against us, or we need to watch out we need to watch our borders for those people over there, and it creates this separation consciousness. Because the Christ is all about love. Love is unity. It's not seeing anybody as separate. You know, you're over there and I'm over here. No, it's like a unification. So this is one of the main reasons that I understand that the Jewish people didn't embrace the Christ, because there was the devil sitting on the shoulder reinforcing these false beliefs, like they're out to get us. The world is not a safe place for us. We have to protect our own. And in that understanding of protecting our own, which is a very human thing, right? The Christ doesn't live in protecting just the self. That's what I think is number one reason for that.
That reminds me of the Amalek concept that you talk about, where the enemy appears whenever you raise your hand against the throne through fear and doubt. So it kind of feels like shadow work at a collective scale.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So good. So astute. So true. Like basically we have to stop pointing fingers. And when I say we, I mean everybody on earth, but I'm also talking about Jewish people because, I'm Jewish and I recognize this in my own genetic line and stuff. Stop pointing fingers at other people and do our own shadow work. Um, because they're like, we are, each of us has our own hand against the throne of Yah, has our own hand against the divine. And that's how we have to realize, when you go into deep meditation or you do like ceremony, like you did deep medicine, like in deep meditation, you can see the subtle choices that we make in the subconscious and where the hand is against the throne, and learn to just submission, letting go, prayer. Thank you, God, for taking me into the true nature embrace of the oneness. Let all ideas of separation and fear and doubt be released from me. I am that. It's like pointing at it, but not really, because it's in the self. I am that I am. And then Amalek need not manifest anymore. This thing of Amalek manifesting from generation to generation has been the actual reality on planet Earth, that from generation to generation, some people gets this Israel derangement syndrome. Trump derangement syndrome is a thing, right? It's a thing. Well, Israel derangement syndrome is also a thing. It's quite real. So, and there's some people that are drawn in for whatever reason. I haven't analyzed that a lot, but like the Nazis is an example of one of the people in the last 100 years of our history to take up this role. Okay, we're going to be Amalek now and try to destroy the Jewish people, or deny them their right to exist, or just hate on them, or exile them, or whatever. So, and then that reinforces the belief, well, the world is against us. There it is again. You see, there it is again. We have to protect ourselves. And this cycle keeps going and keeps going. And that's happening a lot now again today. This separation energy, this fear energy, this hate energy it's the fire that the Ahrimanic impulse likes to stoke, to keep people separate and not unify. Because through unification, the Christ lives. And we have to unify. That is the destiny of the planet. So right now it's like we're at a very edgy time, very edgy. And I really want this message. I'm so grateful to you, so grateful that you're having this discussion with me so that I could present these ideas so that Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, all of us, just regular old spiritual people that don't define their spiritual path, can recognize that there's such a strong impulse towards separate identities that has to be resisted, that has to be kind of like dispelled. Your people over there, and like fighting fences, shaking fists at each other and saying, my God is better than your God, or we're right, you're wrong, like whatever, all that stuff. It has to, the number one thing has to be to recognize the people that are there, the person, the soul, and the unity there, the unity of consciousness. It's so relevant right now, so important.
I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of people putting rubber bands around watermelons and they just keep doing it and eventually it explodes. That's how I'm picturing our planet right now, where it's just like a little more tension, a little more tension. And so for some people, it feels very ominous. But for me, I'm just waiting for that shift, that explosion. And I was excited about this interview. Well, when you first reached out, I was like, oh man, is this going to be somebody who is taking the Bible as all literal history? And so I really appreciated the way that you outlined certain things, like even the way you described that return to God after the separation. That is the prodigal son story. Or you talk about in your video series, the Hagar and Ishmael story, where one son stays and then the other one gets exiled into the desert, and how that's the template for how every chosen identity basically creates an excluded brother whose rage then justifies the original exclusion. And so it's like this mirror work back and forth. And it's the only way to experience cold is the absence of heat, for example. And so we need these polarities for our own consciousness evolution. But it's interesting too, because
But it's done. It's done. Like, it's enough already. Like,
yeah, we don't need it anymore.
we don't need it anymore. The separation is enough. The polarity is enough. It's there. It's done. We don't need to feed into it. The feeding into that separation is just going to make matters worse, and the pressure will increase. I think your analogy of the watermelon exploding, like that explosion is not the explosion we want. Like that's the pressure of increasing hatred and tension, and like, and then we're all going to explode into this big thing, and then a lot of people are going to die, and then we're going to look at each other and go, "What have we done?" And eventually wake up. But the life is precious. It's a principle of like God and living and being alive and being healthy is all, they go together. Like our lives are valuable. So we don't want to see war and destruction. We don't want to see people killing people. And so we want this to come in acceleration, like the idea of like bringing the Messiah, the age of enlightenment for all people, not an individual Messiah, but all people waking up to the Christ within. We want that to be brought in acceleration. Because if it's not brought in acceleration, then the pressures will keep increasing. It'll keep turning the screws, the pressure, and it's going to be very, very hard. We're going to see gnashing of teeth with the kind of level of suffering that people are going to experience. I do think that we are in the end of days here. This is the end times. I'm convinced of that. And the things that we were told in the Bible. So the Bible and like the Torah, these things are interesting because they emanate from the divine, but they themselves are not the divine. They're just emanations of, and they are restricted in their expression. They're signposts. They point to the living truth. The living truth cannot be defined or explained. And it's a principle of Taoism, but it's also a principle of just common sense. You can't define the nature of God through scripture. You could just point to it with all these beautiful metaphors and analogies and stories. It's why Christ spoke in parables. You can't talk directly about it. It can only be experienced, and that's the truth that comes through experience. The truth is experienced. It's not written. But they still contain these divine pearls of wisdom, and they contain prophecy, And these things are real. So the fact that like people, a lot of people in waking up kind of reject all aspects of religion, I don't encourage that, because there are divine kernels there to be seen, to be had, and there are fulfillments of promises too that live inside of Torah, that live inside of the Bible. So I love the Bible. I love the Torah. I think they're incredible. I mean, pieces of like work, like they're incredible craft. The Torah is mind-boggling with all of its codes, and I mean, I could go on and on about it. But it's not the true will of God for us now, as the Jewish people might believe, or let's say the Christians believe that the Word of God is the Bible. That's what the Word of God means. It's not. Like, to take the word as literally the written word as the will of God is an Aramonic problem, because it's fixed in nature. And you get into this sort of problem of like, I know the truth, therefore I am in a good place and I will impose my will on others that don't know the truth, right?
This has been a whole journey for me because of my Christian upbringing, then falling away, then really disliking the Bible. I went back and read the Bible, and I didn't have a lens to look at it through. I just wanted to have a lens with fresh eyes, and gosh, it's brutal when just going that direction. But something kept guiding me, and I got really into the Gnostic texts, and that, especially the Gospel of Thomas, really shifted my understanding of so much of the Bible. And it sent me down the rabbit hole of people like Bart Ehrman or Timothy Freck, who talk about what was intentionally stripped from us by those in power at the time. And what's really cool about the Gospel of Thomas is that it is so aligned with so many of the canonical texts. I've actually been writing my own study guide for myself that I'll end up sharing with people when it's completed. But every single saying is the Gospel of Thomas, for those who don't know, are just things that Jesus supposedly said. But every single saying aligns with something in the Bible. And oftentimes it'll be almost word for word, but it'll have a little bit more that completely changes our understanding of it. But what I love about that book is that it forces you from fundamentalism and literalism into symbolism. And so you can no longer read it the way that you did before in the canonical scriptures. You have to switch to a symbolic mindset, and this unlocks the transformation. And I find this so interesting because I have been getting really into astrology lately. I feel like I've spent so many years aligning my inner energy, and now I'm like, well, what is possible if I really understand how to align it externally to what's going on in the world? And one thing I came across was how there's a section of people who believe that every time a major planet or asteroid was discovered, it actually unlocked their archetype a little bit. So, for example, Uranus, the archetype is all about revolution and liberation and sudden change in technology. And we discovered that in 1781, right before the American French revolutions. Then Neptune, all about mysticism, illusion, disillusion of boundaries. 1846, right when photography was invented. Pluto was between world wars, atomic age was beginning, and the archetype is death and rebirth and things like that. So when I see how the Bible is full of archetypal understandings, we understood this in Greek mythology, for example. We weren't just sitting here thinking, well, good thing Hercules killed that other god. Like, it was the archetype of it. Understanding it helped us understand our own internal tendencies and shift them in alignment with something greater than ourselves. And so I think where some people are just like, yeah, you can read it symbolically or literally, who cares? I feel like we are missing a huge part of our transformation when we insist on the literal understanding.
Exactly. And like any text, you can, like an enlightened person, like I really like the path of Kriya Yoga. I really love and appreciate Paramahansa Yogananda, the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, and his master Sri Yukteswar. They both write commentary through their yogic lenses of perceiving the world reality. They write commentary about the Bible. So when one experiences a oneness with the divine, one can then go and look at these different texts and interpret the truth that lives in them from a living space of the truth. So there's a lot of that potential in it. I do want to address one thing. I noticed that Gnosticism is becoming very popular. Like it's all over the YouTube and everything. And I do believe that there's a potential big issue around some of the Gnostic teachings. I do believe not I think some of them are amazing. I've been very inspired by Gnostic thought, Gnostic writings. But I do think that they're wrong, and Rudolf Steiner actually collaborates with that idea that they're wrong in interpreting that Yahweh is the evil demiurge, right? Because the Gnostics write this that Yahweh is he's called Yalda Bayot, and they interpret that Yahweh of the Bible because is the same being that is the evil demiurge that created a prison planet. It's not true. I really strongly feel that it's important for us to discuss this to help people avoid that pitfall. Just in the same way that separation was necessary, Yahweh's role is in assisting that process to help bring a form of the divine such that an individual goes, God has spoken to me. There's God through these signs and wonders, pillars of fire, clouds of smoke, lightning and thunder, these manifestations of divine, like on Mount Sinai, the Jewish people experienced this. They experienced this divine reality, and they said, whoa, God is over there. That creates individuality also. So that there's a purpose in that separation. Remember, it's so tempting to see Yahweh as the evil demiurge, but there's a difference between Yahweh's purpose of hardening the individual I for separation so that the Christ could come, and then the Ahrimanic force, which would like to hold us to not go and become Christ-like, to become
Thank you for
as
that
Christ.
clarification.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time meditating on this because in reading the Old Testament, I can see how that conclusion has come to. I do not
Yeah.
understand how people read the God of the Old Testament and are like, oh, this is all love. Let me just worship you. I'm like, this sounds awful. It sounds like a 13-year-old jealous guy, like just enforcing his will. I don't know. But
Right.
the way I've interpreted that was, I believe a lot of the Bible, or I've come to the conclusion at least, I'm trying to use believe less because
Right.
it feels like it seals
Sure.
something in. But
Yeah.
I've landed on the thought multiple times that we've created God more in our image. And so how much of the Old Testament was written by people who are interpreting the events going on through the lens of their own ego, which puts a filter on how it's presented.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's possible. There's no denying that. And also, again, the Christ principle, the Christ experience, the mystery of Golgotha, Christ incarnating in Jesus of Nazareth and all that stuff is central to all of the purpose of creation. So there were some things that had to happen to line and make that possible. One was that the Jewish people had to believe that they were separate, and they were forbidden from the dreamlike direct connection with God that the other nations and the other epochs had. Like in India, there has been this continuity of all kinds of amazing people directly by connecting with the divine. Persia, Egypt, like all these ancient cultures, they had this direct connection with the divine that was forbidden for the Jewish people. And the language around that is, you will have no other God before me. It's like, I'm a jealous God. So it all serves this purpose of the individuation, strengthening the individual I, so that we were rooted enough in the physical, because the Atlantean venture and then the cultures that evolved from that, ancient Egypt, ancient India, they were very dreamlike. They weren't able to incarnate into the individual form enough to house the I of the divine, the consciousness of God, to fulfill the purpose of creation. So in their separation, they were told, you can't meditate like a Hindu and go into yogic samadhi. You can't do that. You can't pray. You can't dream, have visions. In fact, the story of Joseph illustrates how strong this was amongst the Jewish people. Joseph was, the son of Jacob. He had dreams and he was experiencing a divine connection. He's a hybrid being, Joseph. That's what makes him so special. But what did his brothers do? His brothers are the tribes of Israel, tribes of Jacob. They took him and threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery and got rid of him because he had this nature that was not like the nature of the Jewish people. It's like, we do not go there because we have this specific role. So there's so many things that we could poo-poo today in looking at that kind of behavior, but it's all part of this grand scheme in preparation, through separation, fulfillment, and then yay, celebration. So the fulfillment has happened, but we haven't quite gotten onto that train yet. So this is so interesting. Like, it's so tempting. It's so easy to miss the picture. And now, like let's say you're non-Jewish. You're not a Jewish person, and you believe in the unity of all people. And you see this strong individual nature that still lives strongly in the Jewish people. You could easily go into finger pointing and judgment about that. It's very easy to go into that. But this is also one of the reasons why I felt compelled to make this video series, is to show people, easy with the Jews, give them a break here. Love on them, pray for their release of their fear. The Jewish people should open their heart to the rest of the nations. We need to unite as peoples. Don't fling the hatred, because the Jews have proven their ability to survive against almost all odds for a heck of a long time. It's only going to solidify the separation impulse. So anybody throwing hatred and judgment towards the Jewish people is just continuing the very problem that they're judging the Jews for. So don't do that. Send love. See the Jewish people opening up in Israel, opening up to the love of creation, to the acceptance of Christ's impulse. And then I think we'll be much better off than this whole hatred game and pointing fingers and stuff like that. So I really appreciate that, people seeing it that way.
Right. And it's absolutely impossible to find wholeness and unity inside of yourself if you're projecting the opposite outside of yourself, because all you're doing is creating more and more separation within you, whether you want to believe that or not. But I love leaving listeners with one weekly challenge, something to kind of bring this into the reality, whether it's something to do, something to think about, something to meditate on, maybe to help heal what you would like to see in this universe. What would you leave them with?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I would leave them with the one statement that they can make about their nature that's true, and anything else that's appended to it is limiting or restrictive or false, and it's that I am. So you could say, I am that I am. Literally, what your ego is doing is saying that I am that I am. That's me. That's who my true nature is. So if you catch yourself making any statements or appending anything on that, just take it with a real light grain of salt. Let it be light and fairy-like and ephemeral. There's nothing wrong with saying, I identify as a Jewish person, or I'm Christian, or I'm a man, but not to grab onto it as if it's your true identity. So the I am is pure consciousness. It's pure beingness. It has nothing attached to it. It's beyond the nature of the mind. It just is. It is, it was, and it will always be. So what we're looking for today is the opening and the falling into the very fundamental template of existence and reality, which is not defined by identity. It's not defined by gender, by skin color, by race or religion or nation. It is the universal principle that we all live within. So that's the challenge, just to be mindful of your thoughts and how you're identifying, and to really kind of let go or step away from, not to like reject, because there's beauty in our different identities. There's beauty in being a man and being a woman. There's beauty in being American and being Israeli or Palestinian. There's beauty in everything that is created in this world, but not to be like, like this is who I am. Like that's too much. It's too much because it shoulders out the real identity, which is I am that I am and nothing else. So that would be the challenge.
I love that. And I can't help but think how silly it is that our ego human selves are trying to find unity and oneness just by dissolving gender and culture. So misguided, but it's for so listeners out there, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's also an activity of the Ahrimanic impulse, by the way. That's why it's strong. And we have to be mindful of that. Yeah.
Good point. And for listeners who want to chat about this and work on that challenge together, talk about it, join the Mind Love Collective at mindlove.com/join. And for those who are resonating with your work, want to watch your video series and learn more about what you're teaching, where's the best place for them to find you?
Okay, so the best place for them to find me would be just Dr. Moshe, MOSHE.com. And it would be really awesome if you could put, because like the video series, it's called Israel's Unfinished Covenant. So if you search for that on YouTube, God willing, it comes up because there are some restrictions on that video series. There's a strangulation of flow because the impulse is to support people that are very divisive and very inflammatory and very one-sided, and those people are being promoted so that there's the sidedness that's being promoted, and those that are speaking of unity and ending the wars and like ways of finding brotherly, sisterly love ain't doing so good. So please share.
Want to work through this week's Mind Love Challenge with others? The Mind Love Collective is a free community with monthly themed calls, weekly challenge accountability, and real support throughout the year. So join us at mindlove.com/join. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.